the TeachPitch podcast. We are very excited to be launching a series of interviews for TeachPitch, a global community of 50,000 subscribers from over 205 countries to date. And for these interviews, we have selected a number of subscribers who have achieved great things. And by great, I mean amazing. Think of former presidents, entrepreneurs, people who've built hospitals, huge non-profit organizations, successful journalists, doctors, etc. And what all our guests have in common is that despite their great success, they've encountered many enormous challenges. So what were these challenges and how did they overcome them? That's what we're going to be talking about here. My name is Aldo de Pap and I'm massively looking forward and very grateful you can join us on this journey. So sit back, relax and download the podcast here.
A good lab leader just creates an environment where people in that lab can suddenly go ding and have that little clever idea and then are supported in pursuing it. And that's what we're doing in life, I think, is creating those environments for the clever young people to thrive. Because actually it is true that most really clever ideas happen when people are young.
In this interview, we talk about all that happens when you decide to carve out an unusual career path for yourself. From saying yes to anything that comes your way to finding a mentor who can actually help you. We also talk about what it really means to trust each other so you can work together in the most symbiotic way while achieving big shared success. Please enjoy this interview with intensive care doctor, author and inventor Professor Hugh Montgomery. My next guest is anything but predictable. And even though I have never really had the honor of speaking to him before, I suspect he refuses to be defined by only one characteristic, job, profession, or project. Seemingly, Professor Hugh Montgomery has taken it upon himself to excel on many levels. As an inventor, climate activist, author of thrillers and children's books, as an ultra-marathon runner, a naked skydiver, a normal deep-sea diver, an avid visitor of every high mountaintop in the Alps, Andes, and the Himalayas, including Mount Everest. And here's the one that impressed me most, as a world record holder in underwater piano playing. Yes, you heard that right. All of the above activities should, however, be qualified as hobbies, because in his day job, Hugh is an English professor of intensive care medicine and the director of the Centre of Human Health and Performance at University College London. Hugh discovered the first gene for human physical performance, has authored nearly 500 research papers in the world's most famous academic journals, and has received over 11 national and international awards. In trying to find out what kind of person my next guest is, I loved Hugh's answer to the question what drives him to overperform in all his activities in a 2019 Guardian article written about him, typically entitled Physician, Ultra Runner, Thriller Writer, Meet the Man Who Lives Life to the Full. Hugh replied, I've got this frustrating, peculiar awareness of my mortality. I know I'm going to die unfulfilled because I don't think there's anything I can ever do that will make me feel as if my life's been worthwhile. Quite a statement that raises a lot of curiosity about this uomo universalis. Hugh, a very warm welcome to you.
Hi, Aldo. Good to meet you.
Thank you so much for joining this program, this podcast program. And I was quite impressed when doing my research on you of all the things that you've been doing. And I'm sure I left out a few because every time I found something, it was like, oh, he's also doing this and he's involved in that and that. So I just made up this summary. But first I want to know, tell me a little bit more about underwater piano, because how on earth did you end up doing that and, also becoming a world record holder?
Well, it's a lesson in life which is probably I don't regret, which is that I tend to say yes to things without really thinking them through. So if it sounds like a good idea at the time, I tend to say yes. And then that's why one of the reasons my life gets so very, very busy. So in this case, I had started as a medical student. I had been a diver before, as you know, and I'd held a commercial diving license. and it was a fundraising effort in my first year. They were raising money for the first portable ultrasound machine, would you believe, in Britain. Those were the days. It was, I don't know, the size of a small car, as I remember. And for some reason, I think I might have not been sober. I can't remember. Either way, I said, well, you know, I could try and play a piano underwater and set a world record. And everyone said, right, okay, you're down for that then. So once I'd said I'd do it, I was committed. And then we had to work out how to do it. And of course, it turns out pianos don't really work underwater. The wood swells and the dampers don't. So in the end, we had to persuade Yamaha, the synthesizer company, to build us a synthesizer to work underwater, which they did. And we set it in a piano case. And then begged and borrowed diving kit from everywhere. And we were going to do 100 hours, but ended up doing 110 because the London radio programme wanted us to surface there. So, and no one's ever beaten the record. And I don't think they will. Occasionally I get phoned up by people to say, I'd like to have a go, how do you do it? And when I tell them, they go, yeah, I don't think I'll do that. That's,
We're not going to try to beat this one. Yeah. No, but I mean, it's quite, I think it's a testimony to your creative spirit, because I mean, it's not necessarily logically connected, I must say. I mean, the diving, yes, but then the piano, and then it sounds like you have a very curious spirit and are trying to try out a lot of things that are not necessarily related to, for instance, your profession. Is that correct?
Right.
Or
I think that is right. And it's an interesting point, actually. I've not really thought about before. But, you know, if I look at my success, for instance, in science, if I was honest, I'm not altogether sure I'm a particularly good scientist. I work with people who are. I work with fantastic statisticians and brilliant molecular biologists. But what I bring to the table, I guess, is creativity and sometimes the instinctive ability to see what it ought to be, what the answer ought to be, how it ought to be working. So I think that is a lesson in life. That, you know, there is plurality. In life, you need all sorts of disciplines, as you do in medicine and in science. So I hate management. I loathe it. I'm rubbish at it. So other people do that in my unit and department, and I do the bit that I'm good at. And in fact, some years ago, I thought I'd improve my memory a bit. I mean, it's good, my memory, but I thought it'd be fun to see how far I could take it. So I did start building a memory palace, which is one of those techniques you've probably heard of for structuring information in your head. And there's no doubt it works. And it was great fun to be able to remember all sorts of things. But I stopped doing it because it stopped the creative process. It stopped someone asked me a question and then my mind going all over the place as I sought to access the information. And that often was quite creative. So, yes, I think the creativity is a very important part of life. And of course, it spills over into the arts stuff I do as well.
yeah, well, and thanks for sharing that. And Memory Palace, I'm definitely going to check it out. And I agree with you that once things get too structural, it can kill the creativity. So you might just get sucked into the form of it, leaving a slightly less room for substance, and in this case, substance, when it comes to creativity. Before we dive into your challenges, because a lot of the challenges, the challenges you've submitted are also about carving out a career path, and in your case, quite an unusual one. So I'm very curious to hear more of your secrets. I was wondering about, what gave you scientific fame, so to say. I hope you don't mind if I say it in that way. Around the gene, kind of, relating the human gene to training and performance, and basically seeing, hey, there's a genetic connection that can be made, whether we have it in us to become an athlete. Am I interpreting it correctly, or am I saying it completely wrong?
No, you've got it exactly right. But again, I'd love to say that, I'm some sort of genius who, had a clear path and answered the question that was, needed answering. And in fact, it was far more random than that. And I think fate and chance, plays an awful lot of a role in success. And people who are successful often don't tell the truth about the fact that sometimes a lot of life is luck. So what had actually happened was I was doing my higher degree research, and what I was doing, it seemed to me, clearly wasn't going to work. It was using transgenics, and I just thought that this isn't going to get me where I need to go, and I need to come up with something else quite quickly. And I was working on I was working on rodent renin-angiotensin systems, and it was at a time when we were beginning to realize that those systems did more than regulate human blood pressure. But it was hard to explore in humans. And I had some evidence that they were regulating heart growth in animals. And suddenly, in the literature in Nature, appeared a paper with a genetic variant in the key regulatory component of that system, ACE. And that gene, or gene variant, altered ACE expression. So I thought, oh, well, here's the easy answer. If ACE is important in human hearts, and you've got 2 copies of the gene that make more ACE in your heart, then your heart will grow more. And if you've got 2 copies of the gene that make less ACE, your heart will grow less. So since I'm young and I can't possibly do a 50-year study of heart growth in, let's say, hypertension, I need a model that will answer it quickly so I can get my thesis finished. And I thought of exercise. So I approached the army because I thought, well, I need the environment to be the same. So I need people of the same age, the same race, the same sex, eating the same food, drinking the same water, doing the same exercise. And then any change in heart growth will be largely genetic. And in fact, it was one of the things that I became known for, because this idea of using gene-environment interactions to explore genetics wasn't really at that point done. And it worked incredibly well. And what we found was that the 2 copies of the high ACE expression was strongly associated with heart growth. And then the question was, well, someone might criticize the paper and they might say, well, come on, Hugh, it's nothing to do with the heart, it's all to do with the muscle. And all that's happening is people with 2 copies of the high ACE expression are just unfit, and their hearts have to work harder. So I did a quick experiment to prove that wasn't the case. And to my surprise, I found it was the case. It was absolutely the issue that 2 copies of the ACE gene were strongly influencing human physical performance. So you can see it was one of those things. It was a failing degree. Someone else coming up with a finding of the genetics, me having a random idea, and then having to do a quick experiment to prove something wasn't the case, and it was. So in many ways, I'd love to claim that I'd seen it all the way through, but I didn't. It was luck. Once I'd got to that point, then things took off, because then you've got to try to work out why that gene is associated with variation in performance, and that came down to oxygen consumption, and that took us on to Mount Everest, and so forth. It all rolled on from there.
Yeah, and I mean, you're making it sound very easy, this specific process, and kudos to you for doing it that way. But what you said about it wasn't the case and it was, right? That's a process. That's not just a one trial and error and off you go, right? This is profound research. This is kind of digging quite deep and getting lots of people involved to make sure your research observations are correct.
Yeah, you're right, and it's a really good point too, because you said getting lots of people involved. That was probably one of the other secrets of my success, because I learned really early on. Some people are just geniuses and are brilliant at what they do and don't need anyone else. That's not me. If you collaborate openly and honestly with people, share your knowledge, make the assumption they're not going to steal your best idea. Most people, I've only ever had someone steal an idea once in my life. Only once did I share information and someone tried to beat me to a paper using that information. Every other time, people are honest. And when you collaborate like that, you bring their brain power to the table, and it's through collaboration that you get the answers. So that first Nature paper we wrote, I made it clear at the very beginning, although it had been my idea, lots of people were contributing to the experimentation. And I just said, we're going to write this as an equal first author paper. Everyone will be a joint first author. And I don't regret that sort of process at all. And it stood me in very good stead since. The other bit is that you need an alma mater, a sort of a support structure. So in my case, University College London, who let you follow slightly eccentric paths. If I was in a more disciplined system, people would have said, hang on, Hugh, you've got to have one question in your career. You've got to build a group that answers that one question. You've got to, where's the program grant? And UCL have been very good at letting me suddenly divert, going down one path and then seeing something else and just heading off down a different path completely. And they've been very, very supportive of letting me do that. So I think that's a slightly unusual situation in most universities, where people are much more regulated about what they're doing, and a very, very focused plan.
Yeah. So credits to UCL for giving you that space, but also recognizing you would thrive in such a context. If it were to be too structured, then you might not get creative. Again, going back to your memory palace, they might have discovered that if they leave you that liberty, then you'll get creative and come and find things that are of use to UCL as well.
I'm not the only one to have said this. I mean, Max Perutz, the Nobel Prize winner, made a comment, quoting Shakespeare, and some of you will know that, but he's made the comment that creativity cannot of itself be created. All you can do is create the environment. And then he said it will pop up like puck in the most unexpected places. So all he said is a good lab leader just creates an environment where people in that lab can suddenly go ding and have that little clever idea, and then are supported in pursuing it. And that's what we're doing in life, I think, is creating those environments for the clever young people to thrive. Because actually it is true that most really clever ideas happen when people are young.
Yeah.
Us oldies aren't anywhere near so good at having those really good creative thoughts, I think.
I want to get into why that is, but not before going into your challenges, because I think your challenges, they're a testimony to what you said before. So I'm going to throw them in as well. And we'll address also why you think young people are better in good ideas than maybe people further down the road. So, your first challenge, I think you've already mentioned it in a certain way. It's, you say overall it's about carving out an unusual path, which you have certainly done. And your secret is, well, basically there's no secret other than do it. And you do acknowledge that you need other people to succeed, just like you said before. You mentioned a mentor who believes in you, but overall your message is in your first challenge in terms of starting with something is, all begins with say yes first and then work out how. Has that been your approach with everything that you've done?
Pretty much, yes. And the other bit, of course, is, it's always attributed to a different golfer, the quote, but, the story goes, whichever famous golfer, I was told it was Gary Player, but it could have been pretty much anybody, was in a very difficult situation with a golf club in a bunker and hit the ball and it flew out and went straight down the hole. And someone said, "That was very lucky, Mr. Player." And he said, "Yeah, it's interesting. I find the harder I practice, the luckier I get." And so whilst I've said there's luck involved, there is no substitute either for working bloody hard. And if you work bloody hard, your chances of being lucky go up. And if you then make yourself exceptional, then you will get the support to allow you to be different. So when I've got juniors, for instance, who are saying, I really want to take a year and a half off, I'm exhausted, let's say COVID has hit, everyone's tired and weary, just needs a break. They say, well, people are telling me I can't do that, it'll be the end of my career. And I say, well, it depends on what you do with it. If you go and smoke weed on a beach in Trinidad, then it probably is the end of your career. But if you go off and do something exceptional, then people will look at you when you come back and go, wow, that bloke Aldo is extraordinary. What an amazing man. We have to have him to work for us. So if you make yourself exceptional, then you get far more leeway. And I'm saying this to my son at the moment with his exams. He's 15. I'm saying there's lots of reasons for trying to do well in your exams, but one of it is it buys you some leeway. People will give you some slack later in your life because they'll go, well, he's obviously smart. So work hard, get a good mentor, but earn the trust of your mentor by delivering.
Yeah, that's good. I like what you said, smoking weed on a beach in Trinidad. But sometimes people choose to do that because they don't really have a game plan. So it's a little bit, and specifically maybe when you're younger, a lot of people say, find out what it is that you want to do. But sometimes people don't know yet, right? And that's also, happens often to young people. So if you want to thrive in something, how do you find out what it is that you want to do? Or are you saying just go with that feeling in your belly of, okay, this is what I want to do and see how far you'll get it?
Well, I think there are two ways in life. There are people, aren't there, who always know what they want to do and they work tirelessly to achieve that one thing, whether it's their Olympic medal in whatever sport it is or being a CEO of a company. But I think it is much more common that people don't really know what they want to do. I sort of had worked out probably I wanted to do medicine and did it, but I certainly didn't know what speciality of medicine I wanted to do. And I lied for a long time about being absolutely certain, because I had to be able to tell people things at interviews. And I stumbled into intensive care. And it was when I stumbled into it, I went, oh, I like this. You know, this is the thing for me. And I do think that's this business about saying yes and trying things. It's the sort of smorgasbord, isn't it? And seeing what you like to eat. If you don't try all the things, you'll never find the food that you're passionate about, or the great skill set you've got. So I think in life, you know, jobs of parents are to allow their children to try everything that's legal and not harmful. And the job of a good mentor is to encourage people to experience and try different things. I think in the end, then you discover what your passion is. Sometimes that's because you find someone else who you go, wow, I want to be like them. Yeah. But the other thing I would say is that it's almost impossible not to bring life skills together. The stuff I do in creative writing, in thrillers and things, directly translates into my ability to write scientific papers with clarity that are understood by people, or to communicate on a stage. My interest in climbing big mountains, you know, I was able to immediately bring that experience to the table when we were interested in how people adapt to low oxygen levels. And in fact, it was climbing a mountain that gave me the big break when I suddenly experienced something. I went, hang on, you know, this has to be happening in a different way than's there. So I think maintaining a plurality of interests only benefits the primary career that you're in, by and large, actually, because you bring some different experience to the table. Yeah.
And I like what you said. It's like you stumble into something, and it is the direction that you want to go in. And so you don't know what the entire pathway will look like, but you can see the first few meters, so to say, the first few yards. And, you know, you just go with that, and it's pleasant to be there. And then with the people surrounding you, which is a good mentor or whatever more, you can get it to the next phase. Moving to your second challenge is, you speak a lot about, okay, you know, all nice and lovely with starting things, but you also need to ensure that there is some sort of success. And there's a success maybe to, you know, according to your own standards. If you're quite a perfectionist or you're very strict with yourself, then, you know, your standards might be quite high. So success might be further off for you, for someone who says, well, I moved into that direction, so that's a success for me. I think that's one thing that I would want to know around this challenge. But you also speak about being successful in collaborating with others and being able to share that success. And again, what you said before, trusting others that they're on the same level in achieving the same success with you.
Yes. Well, I think that's right. I mean, the only success that matters is your own measure internally. Yeah. My father always used to say, you know, the worms will get you in the end. You know, we're all meat puppets. We're irrelevant as individuals in the great scheme of things. And it doesn't matter how great people tell you might be. In fact, there's enormous danger in it, because you might get to believe what they say. So that the only measure, I think, is the internal competition you have. But you have to be realistic, too, to recognize when you're not meeting your own standards. So if you can't put yourself up and say, I'm really great, I'm happy with who I am. I think I'm not happy with who I am. I want to be better at what I do. But it's my internal competition that's the driver. You know, you talked about me running ultra marathons, and I have done a lot of ultra marathons, but I've never won one, and I've never got a hope in hell of winning one, because I'm not very good at running ultra marathons. So the challenge for me is the internal competition. It's not because someone gives me a gold medal, because that's never going to happen. It's the fact that I finished that matters. And you mentioned that point about just getting started, and you're making me think. Of course, the Mao quote, the longest march begins with the first steps. And if you don't know where you're going, that's why you need your mentor and your guide, someone who watches your journey and might be able to help you when you've got a junction to go, do I go left or right? And they go, do you know what? I think I might go right.
Have you ever been in a situation where you've been so unsuccessful that you basically, deleted the whole project? Because the things we're talking about here, from your books to your research papers to, everything else you've done, including underwater piano, these are all successful projects. But is there a project out there that you say, well, I'm not even going to mention that because it just didn't go anywhere, not for my own standards, nor for the standards of anyone else?
That's a really good question, because I'm trying to think of things I have binned. But you're reflecting on it, you're probably right. I probably don't. Because if I've decided to do something, I usually, am tenacious and just won't accept that it's not going to work. I mean, I might, in science, you might get completely the opposite answer that you were expecting. That's not a failure. That's a success if you find the opposite of what you expected. I suppose I had one project on climate change, which I invested a huge amount of my own money in as a charity, and a massive amount of my time, that in the end I could not get the traction I wanted. But I still probably spent 8 or 9 years at it, and I'm still at it even now trying to make it work. I mean, I don't, it is where it is. But no, you're right. I tend not to give up on things. I tend to be a completer. And I suppose that is another lesson. I mean, as a boss, that's what you're looking for in people, isn't it? You look for the completers. You look for the person who says, yes, I'll do that audit, or yes, I'll write that paper, or yes, I'll structure that database, who then does it and delivers it. I weed out early people who say yes and mean no, or say yes and then don't deliver. I think that's a really bad character trait.
Mm-hmm. It's great that you say that, and other previous guests on our podcast have said the same. It's like, it's not about, for instance, how good the idea is and that the idea, gains traction overnight. That could happen in some cases, but it's more about sticking with the idea and making sure that it grows, in whichever direction or however it grows, but just not let go of it. It's your baby, and you will ensure that it will gain traction in life and grow until you've reached that level of success. So I think that's very well put. Yeah.
I think that's right. And be honest, though, because if you get you've done your experiment and something doesn't work, the drug you wanted to use is not effective, then the answer is a good answer. It's a positive answer, but you just have to say, this drug does not work. It should not be used, and, don't try to flog a dead horse, as we would say in England.
Yeah. Yeah. Your third challenge is, and I think you've already mentioned it in your second challenge, is working with other people. And the symbiosis of working with other people, making sure that they work on a complementary level to you. So not doing exactly the same, but that they thrive basically in another direction, very relevant to the entire project that you're trying to build or what you're trying to achieve. How do you recognize, the right people in the projects that you've worked on?
Well, it's very interesting, because I think there are people who are really good at management and very good at people selection and very good at nurturing careers and helping people train and, in a structured way. And I recognize the value of those people, and they're really terrific. I'm not good at that. So I tend to have more projects than I can do, more ideas than I can execute. And if there are people who are interested, I welcome them with open arms. And I let them, my approach is that my job is to give them the ideas to start them off, support them in the work that they're doing. If they've got a junction in the road, they come to me and say, I'm not sure if the answer is this or that, or how should I answer this particular question next? And we talk about the next experiment or whatever, but let them crack on with it. And if they need a bit of money for the next experiment, find it. If there's an obstacle and someone's being obstructive, clear the obstacle for them. But my main job is to let them utilize their own intellects and their own internal drive and just make that journey as easy for them as I possibly can. And my general experience is, if you do that, they do the amazing work. And I get credited on papers when, in fact, the huge amount of, it's not that I haven't contributed, it's just that they're the people who've driven the creative process and actually delivered things. So lots of ways of doing it. I tend not to specifically, have a very structured approach. I just try to find the enthusiasts and the ones that drop out. That's the other bit. The people who make life easy when you support them don't deliver, then I stop investing any effort in them. And I've made that mistake 3 times in my life, where I've taken on a fellow and I've kept supporting them when they've not delivered. It's always been a mistake. If they're not interested, let them go.
And then they fade out naturally. So it's almost like, so the symbiosis isn't there. So it's just the obvious next step. Yeah.
And I'm not trying to get people a degree and a bunch of papers when in fact they're not motivated, not smart, and they're lazy. It's not good to be stupid, but that's not your fault. It's not good to be late. That is your fault. And if you're not bright and you're lazy, then you're in the wrong job if you're doing medicine or science. And I'm not going to support you, because the danger is you come out with a degree and some papers and think that that person is smart and clever and is worthy of employment. And that's going to go wrong then, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you. That's very well put. We've worked ourselves through our challenges, and we're almost at the end of this interview. I wanted to know is there anything from the things I've described above, from the skydiving to deep sea diving to writing books, is there anything still on your list that you say, okay, I need to do this? Anything that, you basically say, okay, here's what's next for Professor Hugh Montgomery?
Well, it's a difficult time for me. So without sort of going into enormous detail, I had two sons, and my eldest son died suddenly last year.
Oh my goodness.
An absolutely extraordinary man and my closest friend. And we did everything together. And anything he liked, I liked. And so I was exploring doing lots of other things because I was doing them with him. So I'm a little bit of a hiatus at the moment because I can't find anything that I want to do because it makes me think about doing it with him. So at the moment I'm a bit stuck, but I'm going to find my way through that. And I think what I might do is write another thriller, or I might write a TV series. I think that might be the thing to do next, another piece of fiction. And then after that, but I'm thinking of writing another, but write something specifically for TV this time.
Yeah. Oh wow, I'm so incredibly sorry for your loss. This is tremendous, and thank you for sharing that. And I, of course, there's an entire process, right? I have no idea what this feels like or what you must be going through, but I wish you all the best in the path of healing and mourning through this. And I also hope that your writing will help on that path. The last questions that I ask all my guests are around writing and reading. So it's good that you say, well, I want to write a bit more. Is there any reading that you could recommend to other people? Is there anything you would like to? I always ask to our guests for what's your favorite book, or what's the book that has inspired you the most? Is there a book you could share with our audience?
Well, in terms of book, that's interesting. I read two books back to back by mistake last year, which, if I'm allowed to cheat by putting two in, I read them back to back purely by chance, but they work incredibly well together. One's called The Looming Towers, which is a history of Islamic terrorism since the 50s. And the other is called Rise Up and Kill First, which is a history of Mossad's assassination program, but actually is a lens on Israeli politics. And it's just fascinating when you see the two narratives running in parallel. It gives you an extraordinary insight into the way the world currently is. And I would commend, if I'm allowed to cheat, I would commend reading both of those, The Looming Towers and Rise Up and Kill First. Because if you read them together in any order, it gives you an understanding of the world today that you wouldn't otherwise have. So those would be my current recommendations.
Nice. And then very last question, if this were to be your podcast series, so maybe that's on your list, maybe further down on your thing to do, the Hugh Montgomery podcast, who would you like to be your first guest? Who's high on your list for you to talk to, if anyone?
If I'd had the chance, it would have been Feynman, I think. A most extraordinary brain. I mean, particle physicist, but also, musician, and that's what I'd like to think. I mean, his breadth of understanding of the world in general was just extraordinary. So, Feynman.
Feynman. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much, Hugh, for your time and for sharing all these challenges and your life with us. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you a little better, the man behind all these activities. I wish you all the very, very, very best, and come back anytime.
It was a pleasure speaking to you.
If you liked this episode of the Teach Pitch podcast, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod for our beautiful theme music, Le Grand Chase. This podcast was produced and edited by Natalie Piles. Project coordination by Inva Cheney.